Hi there, I'm Jenny Kirk. Welcome along to another shed chat out here in the shed with Bolton Trinity Road. And I thought it might be a good idea to go through some of the questions that I keep getting asked. Just generally hang out and, enjoy some beer. Now, I'm unreliably told that this is pronounced as Sing Bao. But I could be completely wrong on that. But either way. I do like that beer, actually. I first came across Tsingtao from a Chinese takeaway many years ago. They were selling it by the bottle when you went there to collect your Chinese takeaway. And I thought I had a bottle, and it's the first time I'd seen it in the UK, and it was really quite nice. So a few years later, when I saw it for sale in a Chinese wholesaler, I got myself a crate of it, and then the likes of Asda and Tesco and Morrison's all started just stocking it. So it's lovely stuff. I can't speak more highly of it. It's very refreshing. It only seems to come in these huge bottles these days. I seem to recall it being smaller bottled when I first came across it. But I'm going to be swigging this, so as the video goes on, if I get a little bit more like, I love you, then this will be why. I've got a couple of trains running because I thought it might be nice to have some things skirting around. So if you see them pass behind me and you wonder what was that, just to save you from guessing, there's a Hornby Class 31, the full fat super detail version, and that's in Regional Railways livery. And then on the other track there's a Bachmann Class 101 in blue-grey livery going around. But hopefully this computer, which is terribly slow, we're out here on a spur from the house, and that includes the internet. It's still loading. It's a spur from the internet. I'm using Ethernet over mains because, as it turns out, a wooden building is very good at screening out your Wi-Fi signal. I did try a Wi-Fi booster and I really couldn't get it to work. And then I discovered Ethernet over mains. So what we've got is where the router is in the house, we've got where it goes into the mains. It actually goes over the internal earth as far as I understand it. So unless somebody creates a dead short from live to earth, should be alright. I don't actually know what happens. They must have some kind of protection, otherwise you spike your network. But then at the other end in the shed, there's another one, and it just plugs in with an Ethernet cable. But the problem is that this is very much a cascade of hardware. It's a cascade of hardware. So this computer was cutting edge, all singing, all dancing about 12-13 years ago. And it's a long time for a computer to fall from grace. And it does sort of still work, but there we are. What I've done is I brought up the community comments section on the YouTube channel. So there's quite a few there. And what I'm going to try and do is go through some of them and just answer some of the questions that come up and drink some beer. I sometimes describe out here as being my fortress of solitude. It's quite nice. In answer to one question that I do remember off the top of my head, the shed is insulated. It probably won't show up at all on the video, but we've got thin plywood on the inside. This looks like a hodgepodge of pieces. I don't know whether you can see up here. And that's because I used all the little offcuts I had hanging around from other projects just to patchwork it together. And underneath there, you can possibly just about see poking out there is like a rock wool. It's not fiberglass, but it's like the old-fashioned fiberglass insulation, and that's all stuffed in. And I think in the roof as well, I put some baking foil, just staple gunned that to the inside before that all went, just to try and help reflect the heat. And on the outside, there's solar reflective paint on the roofing felt, and it actually works really well. It has not been the coldest of days outside today, but it has gone chilly now, But even though I'm wearing a coat, it is not cold in here, and you can probably see. You can't see my breath, so it's not desperately cold. And the walls as well, we've got thin plywood, and again that rock wool type insulation is inside the framework of the shed, and it does actually go a long way to stop the extremes of temperature out here. Right, somebody says that Covero Trends de Jardin et Marquis says, show Jennifer. Hello, I'm Jennifer. I have shown Jennifer. Jennifer with beer. There we are, that's that one out of the way. One down. Hey, we're doing really well here. Oh, somebody here, I did a top 1000 video series. I must do some more of that. We're talking about classic experience on vinyl. Saying, don't think they did the other ones on vinyl. Au contraire, they did all 4 of the classic experience albums on double gatefold vinyl. I know because I've got all 4. And they also did some of the companion ones. I have managed to find a classic Christmas, which was the Christmas-themed classical album. That definitely is on vinyl because I've got a copy. As for a classic opera and a classic romance, I haven't found them on vinyl, but they may be out there. So, just a little aside. There's an awful lot of comments which are just sort of like, great, thanks for the review and stuff like that. And it really does touch me that people find these videos useful. So a big thank you to all the people who've interacted with these videos, just to say what they thought of them. It's always nice to hear that, what I'm doing is making an impact. There's a point here on... It's on. I did a video how to build a scissors crossing, and let's have a look. Phil Burrows has said about using a Dremel. Yes, I know about a Dremel with a cutting disc, and I don't have one. So I used what I had, but certainly my dad's got a Dremel actually. I must kind of borrow it from time to time. But a Dremel is certainly a tool. If there was one power tool for railway modelling, which I would say is probably a must, and I don't have one, but I still would say it's a must, it would be a Dremel. They're so useful for cutting things, and also cutting things, for example, if you want to put a hole in where you're going to put a point motor and you've forgotten to cut that before you've built up the baseboards, something like a Dremel makes that job a lot easier rather than doing the method which I had to do in here, which was drill a hole and then get a jigsaw and cut out the hole. And that was all very well when it was still blank baseboards with no scenery on. But once you get to this point where you've got ballast and ground cover, really a Dremel would be the only way to go. There was a point here, I did the how to revive a locomotive with a suspected burnt out motor, and Manthony 1956 is saying about white spirits. I hadn't realised this, but white spirits is a peculiar to the UK thing, and mineral spirits. Turpentine or mineral spirits. So I think it's probably mineral spirits, because turpentine is an extract from I think it's the sap of the eucalyptus tree, or possibly maybe it's something like that. It's derived from tree sap, so it's actually a natural product to a degree. But mineral spirits or white spirit is kind of what you buy in a DIY store, something like B&Q or Home Depot. To clean paintbrushes is usually what it's sold for. But in turn, electrical contact cleaner would work just as well. I just happened to have run out. I used all that on the Volvo. Trying to clean, I can't remember what I was trying to clean on the Volvo. It was probably something like the fuel injectors. I was trying to get them cleaned up before they went back in when I had to change the seals. So I didn't have any electrical contact cleaner to hand, so I used the white spirit, or mineral spirits for viewers in America. But yeah, just clarify that. I hadn't realised that it's sold under different names around the world. We've got a question here from Richard AREU. And this is about, is my layout DC or DCC? This comes up rather a lot. I do keep answering it, but it does keep getting asked. At present, my layout is DC only. I've got a Gauge Master Model D controller, which is, they're still available brand new, but I've had this for, it must be about 15 years or so now. I've certainly had this for quite some time. It's a very reliable controller. I believe they actually come with a lifetime guarantee. If you send it back to Gauge Master, if it develops a problem, they will fix it under warranty. And I think all you have to do once it's outside of the usual guarantee is you pay the postage costs. Could be wrong on that. Maybe somebody from Gauge Master going, no, don't tell them that, you have to pay for it. But I think my understanding was that they come with a lifetime parts and labour guarantee. But certainly, it's still going strong after 15 years with no signs of any issues. So they're quite reliable things. I wouldn't expect them to develop a problem. I do keep getting badgered to go DCC. And a number of my locomotives are actually DCC chipped because they've been either bought second-hand that way, or I've got a particularly good price on a brand new, already chipped locomotive. I know Bachmann have sold quite a few. The Class 42 Kelly in the BR Rail Blue is one particular example that springs to mind. It was offered on sale through, I think it was Hatton's, brand new, and it's the one that they shipped ready fitted with a 21-pin DCC chip controller. So just, they run on DC quite happily. The only thing you've got to watch out is if you have something like a Relco track cleaning unit, which puts a very high frequency through the track, which is layered over the DC, which doesn't affect the motors, but will fry the chips. So you've got to watch out for that. And if you have one of those, you can't use it with locomotives that are chipped because it will kill them. And my plan is to go DCC, but I have, well, at last count, over 160 locomotives. And that's a lot of locomotives to chip all in one go. And I think I'd be tempted to sound fit some of them. If you're going to go DCC, you might as well sound chip at least a handful of those locomotives. So, as a signature locomotive. So, maybe something like an A4 Pacific, or maybe, the Class 31 as well. I know that there's a sound file for that that's pretty good. I think a Class 8 would be a must. I've got that many 25s. I think at least one of those being chipped would also be a must. Things like that. And that's a lot of money, so I think it will come gradually over time rather than there being a strict changeover date. When I do ultimately get around to building in the loft, the idea is that it will be set up to run either or, and probably even have dedicated DC tracks for a period of time, and then maybe over time more of the layout is turned over to DCC as and when locomotives get chipped. Also on here I noticed a comment from Roger Spencer talking about the firebox flicker, and this was in the Daypole London and South Western Railway B4, and it's something that if you'd have described that to me beforehand, said, it's going to have firebox flicker, I would have said, gimmick, what a waste of time, that's just extra expense for no real gain. But it's interesting that having run that locomotive, the firebox flicker actually works really well. It didn't come across as gimmicky. It came across as a nice additional feature, and I know that on DCC it's a feature that can be controlled such that you can have the locomotive stationary and be showing that firebox flicker. That's something I guess would be quite good to combine with the sound chip. If you had the sounds of a fireman like shoveling coal in, you could combine that with the firebox flicker for an interesting effect. And I suppose it's about play value as much as anything. These are, after all, big boys' toys. And it's something that when I go DCC, that may sway me as to which locomotives initially get a DCC chip, as to what additional features they provide. A lot of the diesel electric locos, they have directional lights, and that is certainly an additional feature that would tend to make me favour chipping those as a frontline thing. Steam locomotives don't tend to have lights, but the Daypole B4 was interesting to see that flicker, because it did work quite well, and even down to quite a low speed running on DC. We've also got, on the subject of the Daypole London and South Western Railway B4, we've got Richard Brown asking how much was that locomotive. I paid £115, but that did include the membership of the Daypole Collectors Club. I think the actual list price for the loco is £90. I think that's the RRP. So if you buy a main release one, I'm guessing that you possibly get that discounted down a little bit. I'm not sure. They may be selling quite well, and if they're selling quite well, there'd be no reason to discount them, generally speaking. But certainly benchmark £115 if you do join the Collectors Club to get that, but do check it's still available. When I bought mine, they had only 17 showing as still available, so they may have gone by now. If check first. Otherwise, if you join the club and say, "Oh, and by the way, send me one of these," you might end up getting a little bit disappointed. Got a comment here from Paredding about if I get run out of locomotives to service. No, you never do, because when you reach a point where you've worked your way through, there's always one that needs attention. But saying if you run out of locomotives to service, why not build some kits? Finds it quite therapeutic listening to a Radio 4 Extra whilst doing it. I know what you mean with that. Sometimes it's nice to do modelling work with like the radio, or even just music on in the background. Certainly I've done that in the past. It's a bit antisocial to do that out in the shed, I think, to some degree, although I have done it with the Formula 1 Grand Prix on. This computer can play files from either from DVD or on the hard drive. The network itself, I don't know what's wrong with it, whether because I'm at the end of a spur with Ethernet over mains, or whether it's the actual Ethernet over mains kit is quite old now, so it may be a case that it wasn't the fastest, but streaming stuff over that is it's like a 1990s video phone from Kabul or somewhere. It's like this, so not really watchable, but I do watch Grand Prix, and I've done that whilst doing some modelling out here, doing some work, and it's very therapeutic actually, and in some respects it can make repetitive or tedious parts of a task go a lot more quickly and more enjoyably. So things like ballasting, it's quite nice to have something on in the background. So I see exactly where you're coming from. Interesting comment here from Marklin15 about the old cine film. I put up some archive cine film from about 1980 to 82, I think. And they commented about a Peugeot that was nearly new at the time that the video was shot, saying it was still shown as it's saying it was first registered in 1979 and last taxed on in April 1990, and that's probably quite consistent actually with the car at the time. So it was 11 years old when it came off the database, which generally means it was scrapped. I don't know, a very late 1970s car with 11 years, good innings. Certainly these days, it has to be said, I've seen cars in scrapyards near here when I've been hunting for parts for the Volvo that are actually far younger than that in the scrapyard, and not necessarily from accident damage, but you look at them and the body shell is undamaged. You think, why is that? Racked and stacked, having parts pulled off it. What's wrong with it? And I can only assume that somebody's managed to blow the engine is probably the usual thing, or the gearbox. It's some kind of a repair needed that's not economically viable. In this day and age, I'm guessing it's probably going to become more and more common that a lot of the computer stuff in cars, the computer will say no for no obvious reason, and a new module will either be unobtainable or so expensive as to render the car worthless, not worth repairing. Because why would you spend, say, £3,000 on a small computer module to go into a car when the car is notionally maybe worth £300? You'd actually be far better off spending your money on another similar car for £300 that did still work. You could do that 10 times over before you'd spent the same as just replacing that one module. So I guess a lot of these vehicles go as parts cars at that point, which is why it was racked and stacked and having bits and pieces pulled off it. And it's an interesting point, actually, that I think classic car rebuilding and running a classic car, I don't think there's going to be so many newer vehicles around in times to come, because the equipment that you need and the expertise that you need to keep a more modern vehicle running is actually beyond most people. It's not like tinkering with an MGB GT where, with a bit of ingenuity, you can fabricate anything much you need. They're very, very simple. The Volvo is pushing the envelope of what is repairable. There are things on that Volvo which are just starting to creep into electronic control and modules, but they're at the basic end of things. And some of the modules you can, even though they're sealed for life units, things like the ABS module, you can cut your way in, and it is possible to repair things which wouldn't technically be repairable according to the manufacturer. But certainly somebody with a basic understanding of how to use a soldering iron could have a stab, usually quite effectively, at repairing them. Whereas in a modern car, it's a bit like if you tried to repair the electronics inside a computer, something like the motherboard. There's just no way you could do that with a soldering iron. When they blow, they're gone for good. So I think what we're going to start to see is that there will be a cut-off point for classic cars in the future, that certainly by the late 1990s, early 2000s, they'll be the last of the classic cars. And the other ones that you may get is you might get very much mollycoddled newer cars that have genuinely very low mileages, that have been kept garaged or are in the possession of somebody that does have access to a lot of specialist kit to keep them running. And I think car shows may ultimately be stuck in this sort of time warp of not getting any vehicles newer than the 1990s. The Volvo from 1996 that I've got, it's probably a little bit too new at the moment to go to shows, but certainly over the next couple of years, I'm wanting to try and take it to shows. I'm quite pleased with getting it back on the road, and I think as a future classic, it's certainly got a lot of potential, because it's got the convenience of a more modern car without being a really modern car with everything that it has to go wrong. So a comment here from Ian Douglas. Can't believe about how much energy I've got, all the projects I've got on the go. Well, thanks, Ian. I have to say that I always feel like I could be doing more. I think I'm one of those people who will never retire. I've always got to have something on the go. I like doing DIY. I like improving things, and I think that's born in part out of my father was very, very good at DIY, and I think there's an element of, why would I want to pay somebody to do something which I could do myself for a fraction of the cost? And the other thing as well, I think I'm very much, I have very exacting standards, and I always fret that if I got somebody in, they wouldn't quite do the job to the level that I would want, because I will very much custom build things to fit the use. to maximise on space, to maximise on efficiency. And I'm guessing, you get a company in, there's element, I don't want to call it cutting corners, but certainly there's elements of standardisation which to me would compromise my vision of how I want the finished project. So I think in part there's that as well. I've just finished doing sound and energy heat insulation in the main bedroom of the house. And I'm really pleased with the end result, but it's something you couldn't realistically have got a builder in to do, because I don't think they'd have quite understood what it was I was after doing. And I used, in fact, the leftovers are down here. It's this stuff, and it's like an insulation. It's almost like polystyrene. It's quite light. You might recognise this. A lot of people build landscape out of it, and a lot of this stuff that's left over will probably go into building the landscape part of the layout in the loft ultimately. But I put that on the wall with a wooden frame, plywood over the top, and then carpet tiled over that. And the end result is a lot like how I remember the studios at BBC Manchester being, in that they, sound dead and sound insulated, and it gives a really lovely warm sound, but I've noticed that the outside world seems ever so much further away. And it's also a lot warmer in there, which was the main reason I did it. But no, DIY's good. And I always take the view with projects that, you shouldn't be put off something. You shouldn't look at it and go, oh, I'll never be able to do that, I'll get a little man in, because the little man you get in will manage to do it. The expertise exists for a person to do that job. So what stops me from being that person? And if I don't know how to do something, I guess maybe it's a confidence thing, I'll find out. And the internet is very good for that. You can find instructional videos on so many different things on the internet. You can also find web pages which give you step-by-step run through, and that's how I figure out how to do things. Or I ask my dad. There's a lot of things my dad knows how to do, so I'll ask him how you do it. Never be afraid to ask. And a lot of it is about being systematic and thinking things through logically. And anybody can do any of these things. It's not as difficult as you think it's going to be, is how I generally find a lot of these tasks. And I've taught myself to do an awful lot of things over the years simply by thinking logically, how would you do that? And save myself a lot of money in the process. And you feel a lot better about it if you have been the person who's actually done the project. You come out of it with that really happy, smug feeling that you've saved yourself a load of money, and you know that the quality is there because you've seen it inside and out. I know, looking at that wall in the bedroom, that the job is done right all the way through. It's not carpet tiles covering up a bodge job. It's not like that. And you don't have to worry about the job because you know that you've done it right. So a little bit of worldly advice. Don't talk yourself down. Always have the confidence to take a job on. You may be pleasantly surprised. You may make a complete hash of it, but actually you learn more from your mistakes. You make a mistake, you've learned a valuable lesson, and this was something that I was taught in Sea Cadets. When you make a mistake, you learn about why it went wrong, what the consequences were, and it's something you don't repeat that mistake again. But if you do it right, you've learned nothing about the pitfalls, if that makes sense. I was taught engineering that way. Mechanical engineering. I say engineering, people think, you're very good at building bridges. No, that's not what I did with the naval side of things. It was mostly about engines, transmissions, outboard motors, that kind of practical mechanical engineering. So I know my way around an engine, and I know how synchromesh works as well. which is a bit of a dark art. So there we go. If I ever need to rebuild the gearbox on the Volvo, then I'll know what I need to do. Whether I can get the parts is another thing. Actually, to be honest, with something like that, I'd probably just go to a breaker's yard, like that one in Bedford, and just pull a complete working gearbox rather than mess around rebuilding one of those. Got a comment here, actually. I'm going to end on this because I think, judging by the bottle of Tsingtao beer, I've drunk plenty and I'm probably rambling on now. But Rich Turner Music says, keep it clean, keep it sensible, the mind boggles. Yeah, it does. You should see some of the comments that have to be deleted. Some of the things people request. Unbelievable. But, you know, that's the internet for you, isn't it? You know, plenty of cat videos and people arguing about where the toilets are on the Starship Enterprise. No, don't comment about that. I have seen the schematics. I do know where the heads are. I'm not a Trekkie, honest. But anyway, I hope this has been an enjoyable insight, and I hope I've gone some way to answer a few questions that have come up recently. But that's all from me, Jenny Kirk. Thank you very much for watching. Out here in the shed, and hopefully there'll be more videos from out here. I quite enjoy doing these. It's certainly a good excuse to sit out here in my fortress of solitude, enjoy a beer or a glass of wine, and you know, get a few things off my chest. But until next time, don't forget to like this video, share it too, and subscribe to the channel, and you'll be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. Also, you can follow me on Instagram as Jennifer E. Kirk, and maybe get a few hints about things that I've been up to. Also, don't forget, check me out on Patreon, and you too can be a supporter of this show if that tickles your fancy. And it's always very much appreciated, anybody who does do that. So it helps me bring the videos to you that you enjoy. And also coming up, we're just finishing the proofs for some new books that I've written. Now, I haven't had a brand new book solely written by myself out in quite some time, so I'm really, really pleased about a trilogy, actually, 3-part book. It's really good, actually. Again, I'm not very good at describing my own books without giving away plot points. But certainly they'll be available as ebook and also as print copy if that tickles your fancy. So do look out for those. They'll be coming up soon. I'll maybe tell you a bit more about it in a future video. But until next time, you take very good care of yourself. This is me, Jennifer Kirk, saying bye for now. Today's video has been brought to you in part thanks to the generous donation of my fans on Patreon. And a special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Mark Anthony, Michael Churchwood, Mark McShane, and Bob 310. If you'd like to help support the show, head on over to patreon.com/Jennifer Kirk. Thank you. Today's video has been brought to you by my books, Bringing Home the Stars, Twinkle Little Star, and also you can get the complete comic collections of All Over the House, Books 1, Books 2, and also the wacky zany Life of Knob T. Mouse. Thanks, and catch you later.